I came along in the early 1960s, which, even though it was a century after the Civil War and after the Emancipation Proclamation and the amendment freeing the slaves, nevertheless was still a time of great apartheid in the South. There was a struggle, of course, going on at that time. It was the height of the civil rights era when I came along, but Jim Crow in those days was still very much alive and well. I don't have distinct memories of separation of spaces like colored areas of restaurants or, of public places and so on. But I do remember our neighborhood where I grew up as a child was solidly white. Yet my mother and father and my mother's family insisted very much on upholding the Baha'i principle that we would not only believe in the oneness of humanity and in freedom from prejudice, but we would also practice it. So we frequently had African Americans who were friends over to our house, and others, various other ethnic groups over to the house, and sometimes for Baha'i informational gatherings. Now, when I was really little, we lived in what's called a duplex, which is to say it's two houses in one, separated by a wall. And on one side of the duplex were my mother and father and my brother and me, my sister not having yet been born. And on the other side of the duplex was my mother's sister, my aunt, my maternal aunt, and her husband, who, as it happened, was a newly minted physician at the Medical College of Georgia. And we had informational gatherings on the Baha'i faith, which we called firesides, at the home. And sometimes I think it was at our side of the home and other times on their side of the home. And we invited anyone who wanted to have conversations about the Baha'i faith, but also very particularly about this issue of freeing ourselves of racial prejudice. And of course, this was a very big topic, so it was one of great interest to people, and many people came, including people of European descent, but also African Americans. Well, it wasn't long before these regular gatherings in a neighborhood like that came to the attention of our neighbors, and my aunt and uncle and parents began to receive complaints from the neighbors, usually disguised. That is to say, they would get a phone call and someone, in a sort of a feeble attempt to cover their voices over the phone, maybe with a towel or something, was just saying, hey, don't do this anymore, we're going to come and get you, and so on. They, I guess, ignored those threats and continued with the meetings until one night at a fireside that was being held on my aunt and uncle's side of the duplex. As people gathered and the sun was going down and the meeting was about to begin, the phone rang in the kitchen, and of course, for the younger generation, there were times when phones were actually connected to things called wires, and they were attached and you couldn't walk around the house. So the phone was in the kitchen, and my aunt went into the kitchen to pick up the phone, and on the other end of the phone, a voice came on to the effect that, okay, well, this is it, we've had it, we're coming to get you now. Now, as it happened, the kitchen window, of course, was there, and she was looking out the kitchen window across her backyard and into the backyard of one of the neighbors that we knew had been registering these complaints. And as she listened to this voice, she saw people getting into a pickup truck carrying what looked like shotguns and dynamite into that truck. So she realized then that this was a very serious issue, that something was about to happen. Now, as I said, in the living room, there was a Baha'i fireside just about to begin. So she ran in and she said, all right, I'm going to turn off the light. Everybody get down on the floor. Don't say anything. I'll let you know when it's okay. But she didn't explain what was going on any further than that. She ran back to the phone and attempted to call the police. And the police response was along the lines of, well, one shift is about to get off and the other shift hasn't come on yet, so it's going to be a little while. So she realized that, in a sense, what they were telling her with this excuse was that they had no intention of coming out to help. So she then called her husband, who happened to be on call that night as a resident at the local hospital, told him what was going on. Now, he had friends, and so he began working on the idea of getting the police out there. And in the meantime, she went to a window and could peer out the curtain, and she could see that the truck came across the lawn with the headlights off, the windows down, and guns actually pointing out of the window. It rolled onto the lawn, stopped, guns pointing out at the house, paused, and then it just kind of rolled back out and came back around again 1 or 2 times, until finally the police did come, and with her husband in hot pursuit, following the police. And the police managed to find these people and defuse the situation, and nothing happened. And only then, after a period of time had elapsed, when the husband came in, when all was clear, did they turn back the light on, and the people who had been sort of sitting in the darkness, were then, back in the light, and they were invited to resume their seats. And only then did she explain what actually had taken place, because she didn't want people to panic. And one of the people who was not a member of the Baha'i faith said, "Oh, I thought that this is just what Baha'is do at the beginning of their meetings. They turn off the light and everybody meditates for a while." So it became a source of humor. But what impressed people about it was, and not only the African Americans who were there, who were not members of the Baha'i faith, but also the white folks who were there, not members of the Baha'i faith, was that this truly was an example of being willing to take a stand for what you believe. And it was deeply impressive to the people who were there. And most of the people ended up also joining the Baha'i faith for that reason, because here was a group of people who really wanted to try to live up to the standards that they were promoting in a very important way. And so from that point forward, those souls were known to us as our shotgun Baha'is, because they came in that way.